Well, welcome back. As you might see, I gave my channel, a name, Joy in the Journey. Because I've learned over the years that living with a disability, that while there are all kinds of trials and difficulties and things you have to overcome and so on and so forth, it's always, God is so good. He mixes it with joy in the midst of it all. I think that it just takes a matter of looking for those things to be joyful for, to be grateful for the things that, there's always somebody that's worse than you, that has it harder and rougher than you do. And that's not always easy. You have to kind of train your mind and your heart for that. But um, there is joy. And God has always given me reasons for joy. And so that's why I decided on this. Anyway, so tonight I thought that I would talk about my time in Connecticut, Newington Children's Hospital, which I mentioned last week was the place that I really attribute my survival, uh, being as long, my longevity of life as being as long as it has been thus far. And um, I don't see myself dying anytime soon. No other way to put it. But anyway, oh God, I hate it when somebody walks by my window. But anyhow, um, so yes, I am deeply grateful for Newington Children's Hospital. I recently learned that they closed their doors some years ago, and they converged with Hartford, Connecticut's UConn, which I believe stands for University of Connecticut. But back in the day, it was the place to be. Connecticut, as I said, took children. They specialized in kids like myself with spina bifida, but they also had many other kids with other disabilities that they worked with. My first time in Connecticut was at the age of 8, and the first surgery that they did on me was to close a wound that I had on my backside, which I believe in my last video I had mentioned that I had a wound that my mom had been trying to heal for literally years, and they did plastic surgery on that. And mom and I were talking the other day, and we were trying to remember, did I go home for a time after that or not? And neither of us could come up with the answer, but we think that it was at that point that I ended up just staying for the entire 2 years that I was there. Connecticut was unique in that it had, of course, the usual, medical facility, obviously, physical therapy, occupational therapy, every kind of conceivable therapy that there is, that I'm not thinking of off the top of my head. But they also had a dental department, and there's a funny story with that. Um, I'll get to it in a second. But they had dental. They did have counseling. They had church, and the different floors. I believe there was four floors, or maybe, gosh, I don't remember actually. There was fifth floor. I believe there was the fifth floor and the sixth floor were the two floors where the patients were, and then there was two units on either side. And so you started out, well, I started out because I was young. I started out on 6 South, I believe it was. And then when I got to be like 9 and 10 years old, I went to 6 North because they put me on the sixth floor. And they also had a recreation department. And the recreation department were fabulous because they brought in entertainment for the kids, parties for the kids, um, even having parties outside in the parking lot. And they would clear the whole parking lot, and they would have like a carnival and things like that. People from local restaurants like McDonald's and Burger King would bring out the Hamburger burglar, if you remember that guy. Ronald McDonald, of course. All the different people, that the characters of those restaurants would come and visit the kids. They had local people that were like well known, like singers, stars in their own right, not necessarily international stars like Whitney Houston or the Osmonds or whatever, but in their own right, different things like that. Marching bands. I mean, it was just my memories of Connecticut. Yeah, a lot of them were scary memories. A lot of them are very unpleasant things that I had to go through, tests that I had to endure. And I thought I would talk about a couple of them, or at least one of them that came to my mind before I decided to put this video together and talk about it. And my mother told me that the last video that I made, I was talking too fast. So I'm trying not to, put too much pressure on myself and feel like that I'm limited for time, but I'm kind of acutely aware of it. But anyway, so my mother asked me one time, when she asked me to write about my life, my autobiography, she had asked me if I ever felt abandoned. And so that's where this video is kind of like really important and special in a way, because that was the one thing she really wanted to know. And no, I don't recall ever feeling abandoned per se. I do remember not liking it when they left. I was in Connecticut and they went back to Maine because they had to work and they had to save the money for the gas to be able to come back. I was separated from my parents for 2 years. Yeah, 2 years. And so every other weekend is when they would come to visit. And I always remember looking very much forward to, when I had a sense of time and an understanding of what time was, and how it worked and everything, and figuring out that, okay, like I would say to myself, okay, so it's this weekend they're not coming, but next weekend they are. So I would look forward to that all through those 2 weeks, And when I remember feeling like when Friday would come and I knew they were coming and it was that weekend that they were coming, I remember being very excited. And the nurses, oh my gosh, the nurses, they were just unbelievable. Those ladies were just, I can't say enough, really. But they would get just as excited for me, because a lot of the kids, most of them were probably, like from the area, so they got visitors quite often because they didn't have parents that lived out of state. So, but I did have an aunt and uncle that did come and visit. My aunt Zill and my uncle Pat. They lived like 20 minutes away from the hospital, so they would come at least twice a week to see me, and that helped. And then their kids would also come as well on occasion to visit. But the recreation department, I remember, was very instrumental. And the other thing about Connecticut that was very unique was that they had school. So, and they had it from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade, which was really neat, because then that way it helped you to keep up because a lot of the kids, like myself, were long-term. And long-term meaning like more than 6 months or more than 3 months or whatever. And in my case, of course, it was the 2 years. But so I remember going to school every day while I was there. And I remember being there and not really understanding when the, oh gosh, I can't remember. That's awful. I really wanted to tell you, but I can't remember who it was. But when the astronauts landed on the moon, I was there. And the teacher had it on the TV in the classroom, showing him, I think it was Neil Armstrong, was it? I don't know. Tell me in the comments below. But I remember that was that first time that had ever happened. And so it was on the TV and we got to watch that. And that was part of the, educating us, because this was history, And so, yeah, that was really neat. They did the best they could. These teachers were tutors, really. And came from, like the local school system and stuff, and came in and taught the kids. And they were tutors, really. But it helped to keep the kids abreast of school so that when they went back home to wherever they lived, they wouldn't be too far behind. I always ended up being quite behind anyway. just because in my younger years, I was often sick. Um, I caught everything that floated on the wind. So, and in a future video, I'll talk about my school days and being integrated as a disabled person in the school system and being the only one, which was a challenge. But yeah, Connecticut, I can't thank them enough for being where I am today. And they really were very instrumental. I went through a lot of surgeries. So, in a future video, I would like to talk about, which will probably be next Sunday, talk about some of the surgeries that I did have. I don't know how much longer I should continue. Maybe I could give you a couple of examples. One of them was, yeah, I got time. I got my coffee. We're good to go. One of the surgeries that I did have was, of course, the plastic surgery for the wound that just refused to heal. That was one of the first ones. And then they did all kinds of different tests and everything. And remember, I had told you guys last week that that hospital, although they wanted to try, they wanted to see, how far that they could get with me, but they really didn't hold out that much hope. But as I said, whatever little hope there was, mom and dad clung to. Many of the procedures that they did on me were also very experimental and new for their time. So they were really taking a chance, and that's what I meant by when I said my parents took chances, because a lot of the things that they were doing were very experimental. And so, as I said, hope was really all that, what little bit of hope that they had was all they had. And so the first major surgery that I had was my spinal fusion. And they did insert a rod in my back. And I also, the other thing too was that I was very, very crooked. I had like a scoliosis. I'd have curvature of the spine, and so I sat very much like this most of the time. And I would get very bad aches in my side and would have to lay down. And this was before this surgery had happened. And I have pretty vivid memories of being taken down, for an example, them prepping me, not saying much, not telling me much of anything. Like usually when you go to the hospital, they tell you, okay, this is going to happen first, and then we're going to do this. They tell you as they're doing it, and what this is going to feel like. With kids, I think their idea was that they don't tell them too much. And so I remember being down in the waiting area. I had said my I love yous to mom and dad, and they stayed and waited for me to get out of surgery. I don't remember how long that surgery was, but I remember getting down there, and there was another kid being rolled by, screaming their ever-loving head off and crying. That set me off, and I proceeded to scream and cry and beg for mommy. I remember that very vividly. And being rolled down the hallway, and they were going really fast. And I was seeing the lights, overhead spin by me as I'm looking up, and I know I was throwing a fit. I know I was. And, screaming and begging for mommy. I remember that very much. And then I remember the next thing was a drill. As I was going under the anesthesia, they put the mask on, and they were telling me to breathe. And of course, that stuff that comes out, I mean, I don't know what they call it, but it's an awful smell. And I didn't want to, because I didn't like it, and I fought them. I remember going like this, back and forth with my head, refusing to take it, and they finally just had to clamp it down on my face and hold me. And of course, sobbing was helping the stuff to get in, right? And knock me out. And the last thing that I remember is seeing a big drill come right straight forward to my head like this, and heard the sound of it. And so what they did was they put me in a halo that went around like this. And then I have, to this day, I still have the scars under my bangs here. There's one right here and there's one right here. And I had 2 screws here. And then the metal piece went around, and I have 2 scars that you can't see at all because my hair covers it. In fact, I can't even find the indentations like I can in the front. But yeah, you can probably see it right there. You see that? So there was a screw there, and then there was one right here that they drilled into my head. And then there was 2 in the back. So it was like all one piece. And then there was ropes that V'd like this, that kind of came up like this. And at the end of the striker frame bed, connected to those ropes, were bags that were full of weights, that they would add weights day by day for so many months. They did that, I guess. And then my legs were placed in casts, I believe, and 2 screws on either side of that. And then the ropes would go down, I'll have to use my arm here, pardon me, a rope here and then a rope here down the leg, from like the knee down, obviously, and with, again, weights on both ends. So there was 2 bags at the foot of the bed. And then I remember coming back from that surgery, and I know that it had to have been hours before I finally woke up, but the first thing I saw was 2 sets of feet, and it was my mom and my dad. And I tried to cry for my mother, and I couldn't get the words out. But the first thing, the nurse bent down. She had to bend way down like this and look up under like that. And she said, "How you doing, sweetheart?" And I said, "I have a headache." And I remember my head just pounding, of course, right? The halo. And so she gave me something, and it made me go out again. I don't know, it might have been a couple of days before I woke up again. I don't know, but I remember my mom and dad were there again, and they were explaining to my parents what this was all about and what this was going to do. I remember my back hurting awful. And then what they had done, and explained to my parents about what the back procedure was all about and everything. And every 2 hours they would flip me. And what that meant was, so I would be laying initially, when I woke up and saw the 2 sets of feet, I was on my stomach. So that's why I could see their feet. And there was a tray at the bottom, so that when came lunchtime or any meal time, they would put the food on that little tray. And anyway, so when it came time to turn me over, they took another piece of the striker frame and sandwiched me. And then they had 3 belts that they used, special types of belts, to tie me in. And then there would be a nurse on one end and a nurse on the other end, and they would say 1, 2, 3, flip. And now I'm on my back. And they did that every 2 hours, every single day and night, 24 hours a day. And I would say the first couple of months, I would get so incredibly dizzy. And I think the first few times they did it, I threw up. And we recognize that now as probably vertigo. But, and of course, the injury in my head is very fresh, and so, yeah, naturally I threw up, and so they would do that every 2 hours. And then from there, I went to a body cast, and I see that we are at 19 minutes and 28 seconds. So I'm gonna cut it here, and I will see you all next week. Please like, subscribe, and click the notification bell if you would like to see more of this. I know my videos are not very fancy. It's just me sitting here talking, but please feel free and ask questions, make comments, share experiences. If you were somebody that also had or have rather spina bifida, and you're wheelchair bound like me, or if you know somebody that has it and would like to share your own journey and the joys and the ups and the downs and all of that with me, I would be more than happy to hear from you. Um, just let me know, but make comments below, ask questions, give me some suggestions of things that you would like to see. Um, Maybe some things about, like, how do I cook at the stove, or how do I go to the bathroom, or how do I transfer, how I do my transfers, because I'm still doing pivot transfers. I'm not using a sliding board. I'm still strong enough in my arms as of yet, and I'm very grateful for that, that I'm still able to do that and be as independent as I possibly can. But anyway, so I will end at the juncture of where I was in a body cast and talk some more about my experiences in Connecticut, and we'll just take it from there. And so I thank you so much for listening and for joining me tonight. And God bless you all. Have a great night. Bye now. Mwah.